Mighty MERP is a production of the Law Office of Melissa Rosenblum and the Niche Podcast Network. Mighty MERP is available on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite apps and players. But the best way to experience the show is to visit mightymerp.com. That's mightymerp.com.
Jeralyn Lawrence is the managing member and founder of Lawrence Law Firm. She's also the president of the New Jersey State Bar Association. Welcome, Jeralyn.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
I'm so excited you're here, and I didn't tell you this beforehand, but you are our kickoff to season 2. So welcome to the podcast.
Wow, that's great. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
So I'm excited to talk to you. I know I've heard you speak about some of the goals and some of the New Jersey State Bar Association focuses of the year. But before we get to that, I would love to hear your origin story, which is really, sort of how you just, think about where you were born, where you went to high school, college, what made you decide to go to law school, sort of the origin of Jeralyn Lawrence and the Lawrence Law Firm.
Oh, great. Okay. So I grew up in Wayne, New Jersey. I went to Wayne Hills High School. My father was a police officer in town and a detective, and also ran the Wayne Police Athletic League, the Wayne PAL. My mother was a school bus driver in the town. So I grew up there. I have 4 siblings, so I'm one of 5. Very involved family in sports, athletics. My dad started the first girls soccer team in Wayne.
Should I interrupt and say, admit that I know you don't remember, but I was also in Wayne, and I think I played on the first travel team with you.
I did not remember, but I remembered after you refreshed my recollection when I met you at one of the bar events. But yes, we played soccer together, which I just love that small world connection.
Yes.
Yes, so I graduated Wayne Hills, and then I went to Kane College, and then I had a hard time getting into law school. I had good grades, but my LSAT scores were pretty horrible, so I had to go out to a school in Michigan, Thomas Cooley Law School, and then I transferred to Seton Hall, and I ended up graduating second in my class at Seton Hall Law School. I think what I attribute my love and passion for the law to is really talking law with my dad very early on. I mean, at least as early as 6th grade, I remember walking out of Schuyler Colfax Middle School or middle school in Wayne, and
I went there too.
Did you? And do you remember it was 6th grade, we had to do a career survey in the library. And they asked, one of the questions is, what did you want to be? And I said I wanted to be a lawyer. And I always thought I would be a prosecutor. I interned at the Passaic County Prosecutor's Office. In law school, I interned at the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I really thought that was my calling. I was always interested in domestic violence cases. I saw the movie The Burning Bed with Farrah Fawcett, and I had no idea that we had this epidemic of domestic violence in our country. I had no idea that these things were happening. So I thought I was going to be a domestic violence prosecutor.
It's funny that you say that. I went to law school with that same goal of wanting to prosecute violent crimes against women and children. So that same idea.
So there must have been something in the Wayne Reservoir or something, Melissa, that influenced us that way. But it did. And then I went to Seton Hall Law School. I got involved in the family law clinic there. And that's where I got on my feet in court in the family law clinic. And I started arguing motions. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed being on my feet. I enjoyed the advocacy part. I enjoyed trying to help help a litigant, help a client seek justice. And so I kind of moved away from the criminal part and then into family, where now I'm practicing exclusively divorce and matrimonial work, but that does include domestic violence. It's very broad.
Right.
That's what we cover, family related, but it's certainly not civil or criminal.
Right. And so, did you clerk after law school?
I did. I clerked in Essex County. I clerked for Judge Glickman in the family part, which was a wonderful experience. I thoroughly enjoyed my clerkship. I learned so much. I learned more of what not to do, I feel like, than I learned of what to do. You know, spending time in the courtroom, which I did a lot, being able to observe some really, really good lawyers and things I wanted to emulate, and some things that I absolutely did not want to emulate. So that was a wonderful experience.
And then from the clerkship, where was your first job as an attorney?
Yeah, then I went out to Somerset County, where I am now. I went to the largest firm out in Somerset County. It's called Norris McLaughlin.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for about 23 years. And I was on the management committee there. I was a practice group leader for the family law department. I was on the compensation committee, and trying to help with a small management committee running the firm. But I decided in 2018 that it was time to go and start my own practice. And so my team and I, we packed up around December 2018 and opened up our doors here at Lawrence Law January 1st, 2019. So we've been here and still in Watchung, still in Somerset County, but a boutique, a smaller firm, 9 attorneys practicing. We have an office in Watchung and in Red Bank in Monmouth County, focusing exclusively on divorce and family law.
So was it a tough decision to go from a large law firm to say, I'm going to open up my own law firm and, handle everything, nuts and bolts and lawyering?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough, and you don't know what you don't know. So I was absolutely spoiled at a bigger firm. I didn't know anything about postage machines and taking out garbage and making sure there's milk in the refrigerator. All things that I know now. I was not aware of the cost of binder clips or exhibit tabs. You live a little bit of a different life there because everybody has a department, and you just put mail in an outbox, and life's pretty good. But I wanted to move closer to home, which I live in Watchung, and now I work in Watchung. I have 3 kids, so that made a real significant difference in my ability to jump to a game or not, jump to a school event or not. So I really enjoyed that. And there's nothing more rewarding than really just seizing and taking control of your financial future, your professional future, as well as those on your team. And so I just felt like I needed a little more security and stability, and was thrilled that the lawyers that were working with me at Norris came with me to open up Lawrence Law.
Right. And when you create, at least when I created my own law firm, I was able to create the atmosphere and the environment that I would want to work in as well. So, I thought that was kind of a neat way to have my own business, of saying, if my staff needs to work from home, it's doable, and I don't require them just to be here. So that sort of a work environment that people want to come to work at as a team.
Well, I mean, it's totally refreshing to be able to make decisions on your own and not being forced to make decisions by committee, right? You don't need a committee to make every single decision.
Right.
You want to try a fun, colorful logo like you did, you can do that, right? I mean, that's what you can decide to do. You want to order a certain type of pen that makes you happy, or order fresh flowers every week, or whatever it is that you want to do, you're now you're making the decision. You own it. So
Right.
if it works, it's on you, and if it doesn't work, it's on you.
Right.
And that's okay, right? There's a lot of freedom in that, but there's a lot of terror in that too. But there's a lot of freedom.
Right. Well, I had a little bit of the terror. I should say a lot of the terror when I opened up, which I did about 4 years ago as well. But, it's nice when you sort of go with your instinct. And, you brought up my logo, and that was like really going with my instinct of trying to set myself apart from other criminal defense firms. Mm-hmm. Mostly are men in private practice, and all blues and blacks and browns. And I really wanted it to be clear that this is a woman-owned law firm, woman-owned, woman-run. And, I had people initially comment about the pink, not sure. And I went with my gut, and it's sort of funny now because people just text me. They see the pink color of my logo, whether it's clothes, pens, and they are sending it to me now. You need to have this. You need to get this. It's just, people see pink in where I work in Atlantic and Cape May, and they know it's me.
Right. And, it makes you happy.
And it makes me happy.
Right.
So you are president of the New Jersey State Bar Association, and I would love to hear how you became involved initially with the New Jersey State Bar Association. I mean, I know most attorneys are members. I'm a member, but why are you as involved as you are? How did you get involved? Was it somebody who, told you to do that, or did you feel like it was the right place?
So my involvement with the State Bar Association started during my clerkship. Judge Glickman, that was his first piece of advice to me, was join the Bar Association. I joined the New Jersey State Bar Association before I even joined my local bar association. And so I did. I joined the New Jersey State Bar Association, and then I immediately became involved in the family law section. And I loved it. I grew up with the lawyers in the family law section, and I eventually got into the officers positions there. I eventually became chair of the family law section. And during my term there, we focused a lot on changing the law, improving the law. And so we worked with the legislature and modified the alimony statute. And we negotiated with senators, and we're meeting with the governor's office on how to improve our alimony law. We adopted an entire statute designed to a collaborative law practice, a way to divorce, a different process to divorce, a way to divorce, in a kinder, gentler process. So I really had enormous exposure to the legislative process. And prior to that, my only exposure was growing up in Wayne, turning on the TV and listening to Schoolhouse Rock. How does a bill become a law? Do you remember that?
I do. Are you going to sing it?
Yeah. How does a bill become a law? Remember?
I can't sing.
Yeah. That was my exposure. I had really didn't know. I mean, so as a lawyer, you're pretty much trained to say you're going to impact the law by arguing cases to a judge and get a case decided, and that's going to go into the law books. But there's this whole other avenue legislatively, how you can change a law. And so that was really an awesome experience. It was infectious. So I loved being able to effectually change through the legislative process. And through my leadership there and my friends and colleagues, that I was surrounded with there, really had a wonderful experience. And that's when I said I'd like to continue on in leadership and threw my hat into the ring to become an officer of the New Jersey State Bar Association, which is culminating into my presidency now this year, which has been really just such a highlight, such a privilege, and such a pleasure. Trying to go across the state to as many county events as as I can, meeting as many people as I can, becoming reacquainted with people that I may have met in childhood, and really trying to identify problem areas in our profession with an eye towards fixing them, not just complaining about them, but finding ways to try to fix them. And there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot we're working on. There's a lot of areas that need to be fixed. So we're trying to go beyond just identifying them, but also trying to come up with concrete solutions or paths forward to solutions so that it's a better practice for us.
So when you started your presidency, did you have a list of goals set out of what you wanted to accomplish in the next, during the 12 months of your presidency?
I did.
And what was the top priority?
So my top priority is we formed a task force called Putting Lawyers First. And that is an intentional name because I strongly feel that lawyers never put themselves first. Everybody else comes first. Everything else comes first but lawyers. And lawyers are really suffering. We're depressed. We're anxious. We don't get help for our depression and our anxiety. And a quote from Desmond Tutu really resonated with me, where he said, we need to stop pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And I think the law has done a really good job of pulling people out of the river. I think there are great programs designed for wellness, mindfulness. There are seminars out there designed to help the stress once it's already hit us. I more wanted to focus on what's causing us such stress. What are the big areas that are stressing lawyers out so that we're depressed and anxious? And so I wanted to look at our fee arbitration system, look at our ethics system. I want to look at our malpractice laws. I want to look at the laws of how lawyers get paid. I want to look at the laws of how lawyers get out of cases. What's the law surrounding negative defamatory online reviews? How can you fight somebody that's defaming you? Affidavit of merit. Who can sign an affidavit of merit against a lawyer? How can a criminal lawyer sign an affidavit of merit against a divorce lawyer? You have no idea what I do, and I have no idea what you do. So I think we should be limiting the scope of who can sign an affidavit of merit. Ethics issues. Right now, there's no statute of limitations on ethics cases. One of our colleagues, had an ethics case brought against her 17 years after the alleged grievance. I mean, I just think that's absurd.
Right.
Some of our colleagues are caught up in the ethics system for years, and they end up before the Supreme Court 5 years later, learning whether they're going to be disbarred or not. And the stress of that, it's just overwhelming.
Right.
Trying to take a hard look at our disbarment cases. And there should be a path back for lawyers when they're disbarred. New Jersey is in the minority of not having a path back. We need to develop the body of law that interprets what's an intentional misappropriation of funds versus a negligent one. I'm not here to fight for thieves or frauds, but if somebody makes a mistake,
right, and
makes a monetary mistake, I don't think that should lead to disbarment. And that is what's happening. So putting lawyers first is taking a hard look at that. We also are studying wellness initiatives. We just did a survey across the entire state bar. About 1,700 lawyers responded. 10% of the people that responded have had suicidal ideations. To me, that's alarming. 30% of the people who responded have considered leaving the practice. So we have to do better. So that was really my core platform issue. But things have come at me that, have been around this whole judicial vacancy catastrophe where our governor and our legislature can't figure out how to fill vacancies is a disgrace.
Right. What is our vacancy number at this point?
About 66. When I started in May, Chief Justice Rabner at the annual meeting, really called to action and said at that point we're at 75 vacancies, and he said the court cannot function properly if there's more than 25 to 30 judicial vacancies, and he's being ignored. So we're trying to run around the state screaming from rooftops that you have to fill these vacancies, and only the governor and the legislature can do it. And they're failing. They're failing their constitutional mandates requiring them to do that. There are plenty of our colleagues out there that are amazing and willing to serve.
Yes.
Many of whom are willing to take a pay cut to serve. Many of whom have dreamed about being a judge from the day they decided they wanted to be a lawyer. It's the legislature's job, it's the local senator's job to find these people and put them on the bench. Many people have already come through the process and are waiting.
So I was going to say, like most people who want to be judges have probably submitted their judicial application. They're somewhere in the process, right?
Right. Yeah. So what's the problem is you have a governor and members of the Senate that do not talk to each other. They refuse to sit in a room together and fill these vacancies. I mean, they just refuse to do it. There's no other explanation. We don't elect our judges, right? And only they can do it. You can't do it by proxy.
Right.
And, governors before them and legislatures before them have not had this problem for this prolonged period of time. So they're failing at what the Constitution requires them to do.
Right.
And so it's our job at the State Bar, to shine a light on that, to talk about how us having not a full complement of judges hurts New Jerseyans. I mean, talk about Cape May. And I think they just put a judge on in family recently, a great judge.
Right.
But they didn't have a divorce judge for a very long time.
Right. Well, they had, I think we talked about this, we were down about 7 judges, and we're a small vicinage, so 7 to 8 judges is a significant number. But Atlantic and Cape May is one vicinage, and so there was judges that were put on the bench from Atlantic that would drive down to Cape May and handle part of that list. We did get 2 new judges from Cape May, and there is a brand new, agree with you, great judge who's sitting in family court now. I will say our vicinage is fully staffed for the first time in a number of years. So I'm not sure how that happened for us, but I know in North Jersey, it's not the same. And I will tell you that I handle a lot of domestic violence cases, even though it's really the only area of family law that I do. And I do juvenile delinquency, obviously, but I handle a lot of domestic violence cases. And my cases are, getting court dates 4 weeks out, 6 weeks out. Restraining order hearings. And they're supposed to be 7 to 10 days. They're supposed to be quick. But there's
4 to 6 weeks out would sound like a dream to other counties. I mean, and it's bad. I'm not dismissing what you're saying. That's a horror show.
Right. Well, for a plaintiff, it doesn't matter so much, when I represent a plaintiff, but when I represent defendants,
It's horrible. You kicked out of your house. You don't have access to your kids. And, there are true victims of domestic violence. I'm very passionate about that. But there are also people that trivialize the true plight of victims of domestic violence and use the prevention of domestic violence act as a sword and not a shield. And when time perfectly a temporary restraining order right before Thanksgiving or right before Christmas or right before New Year's, you're going to have the kids for a very long time before a judge can adjudicate this application.
Exactly.
And that's hard.
Exactly.
And that's a hard pill to swallow. So, we're also busy, when the pandemic hit, court didn't close for 1 minute, as you know. I mean, we transitioned immediately to a virtual reality. Many practice areas practice better in a virtual world. For some reason, there's been this rush to go back to in person. Municipal court practitioners are reeling. They do not want to go back in person for all matters. They would like to stay virtual. They are more efficient. They feel they can serve their clients. Their clients have better access to justice. Their clients all have phones as opposed to money, Uber, access to childcare, days off from work. So it has to be a very nuanced and reasonable approach getting back to the court. What does that look like? So we've been spending a lot of time advocating for our members as to, what does that look like? Another thing that was not necessarily on my radar, but I was on the committee as we've worked on Madden, but this has been something I've been spending a lot of time on. We want to abolish Madden. We want to abolish Madden assignments. The policy of 30 years ago that any lawyer is better than no lawyer just does not make sense. And so the State Bar just passed a resolution calling to abolish Madden. We're getting involved in a case in Camden County. We'll be advocating to abolish Madden. But it just does not make any sense that there's a whole body of law that talks about ineffective assistance of counsel, but yet there's a whole body of law in Madden that talks about be an ineffective assistant of counsel, right? So
yeah,
it makes no sense. It makes no sense to ask somebody that has not seen the inside of a courtroom in 20 years to go and represent somebody that faces jail time, faces a consequence of magnitude and a domestic violence contempt, and say, hey, buddy, go figure it out. That is a barrier to justice. It's a disservice to the litigant, and we really need to abolish Madden.
So let me ask you a question, though, on this, because I know you are committed to pro bono work. I know you are. I see how you are involved in pro bono organizations providing legal services in specific situations. So, but do you think that there's a lot of attorneys that if they were not mandated or required to do some pro bono work, that they would choose not to do any?
No, I don't believe that.
You think most attorneys would find
pro bono work? I absolutely do. And that's why I love the software that the State Bar has developed and is working with county bars, particularly right now. Morris and Sussex County, it's a program called Legal Edge. And Sussex and Morris County have been able to help 300 litigants that would have otherwise been self-represented or pro se. And they were matched up with lawyers that were willing to either do it pro bono or low bono at a reduced rate. And they had representation in court. And part of my mission this year is to talk as much as I can about Legal Edge. I've asked every single county bar president and executive director to please spend some time learning about Legal Edge and how it can complement each county's lawyer referral program. And I think that is really the access to justice issue. Another thing that the State Bar is fighting is the American Bar Association has a crazy group of people out there that formed something called the Center of Innovation. The Center of Innovation, what they believe is that software is going to replace humans. They think we cannot human our way out of the access to justice issue. I think that's insane. I don't think a chat box replaces lawyers. I don't think a robot replaces lawyers. I think the only people that should be performing legal services are lawyers, and the only people that should be owning law firms are lawyers. We have the tools to solve those problems. There are lawyers out there that are active in the legal community on a voluntary basis and beyond. not only in their legal community, but in their schools, in their temples, in their churches.
Mm-hmm.
So I think lawyers always go above and beyond. And, this is not about lawyers not wanting to serve. In my mind, the whole Madden thing is we have to view this from the client's perspective. How is it okay from a client perspective for a defendant who faces jail time
Mm-hmm.
to be represented by a lawyer who is a consultant to a retirement plan?
Listen, I get calls all the time. People just call me and say, I was appointed a Madden, pro bono Madden required client. That's a parole violation. Or, when it's a criminal matter, and they'll say, I have no idea. Can you help me? And and these are people I don't even know. They're out of county. They're just finding my name and my information. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's no reason why an attorney who has no idea, just like if somebody came to you and said, I want you to handle my homicide case, you would say what?
Right.
And if somebody
Right.
came to me, when people call me and say, I want you to handle my custody or divorce, I say, no. No, you don't. You do not want me.
Right.
You want me if you're charged with the homicide, not the divorce. Right?
Correct. Well, so we have, look, and I feel bad. 30 years ago, this was the Supreme Court's temporary Band-Aid to the solution in a municipal court matter. It was a consequence of magnitude, but there was a call to action for the legislature to fund this 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But they never did. And so here we are 30 years later, providing ineffective assistance of counsel to litigants under the guise of, any lawyer is better than no lawyer, which I think we have to start fighting back on that.
Right.
That's not fair to litigants.
And not only that, it's also, I'm going to go back to, it's not fair to a lawyer, because if you are required to represent someone in an area of law that you have no idea what you're doing, you are also setting yourself up for an ethics violation.
Absolutely. You have no coverage. And not only ethics, how about malpractice?
Right.
Right.
And
you can't say to your malpractice coverage, oh, but it was a Madden assignment. Well, they could care less.
right. So, the thing about, I wanted to go back to the putting the lawyers first initiative. So, do lawyers have a higher alcohol or drug dependency issue than other type of professionals?
Yes.
Do you know what the stat is? I'm just curious.
I know it because we did it in our wellness survey. I don't have it handy, but I can get it to you. But
Right.
we do.
So do you think with the whole idea of wellness or trying to get treatment or trying to address the mental health aspect that attorneys fear the repercussions when it comes to ethics issues or any other, if you're not working, you're not going to be able to get paid, that sort of, all those pressures that are put on an attorney?
Ask me, tell me what's the question. What was the question?
So the whole idea of like attorneys that are struggling with anxiety, depression, whatever the mental health issue is, which is correlated with alcohol and drug use or any other, do you think attorneys don't reach or seek help, assistance, because if they're not working, they're not getting paid, or if they kind of acknowledge that they're having a mental health crisis or an alcohol crisis or a drug crisis that it potentially could affect with an ethics violation or the repercussions that come from sort of acknowledging that the mental health or wellness isn't there?
I think it's all those things. The stigma, the shame, I really don't have a problem, that I can handle this, that if I can't handle this, who's going to?
Mm-hmm.
They're holding, the mental load of an entire family sometimes, right? So I think it's all of that.
So if somebody reached out to you or to the New Jersey State Bar and said, I'm really struggling right now, what services are there for somebody who needs the help that they need?
We have a wonderful lawyer's assistance program. It's our LAP program that's housed right in our law center. We have a director that's on site. I would say you call our LAP program, and there's a host of resources available for lawyers who are struggling.
So what is the next, when does your presidency go to? Is that May?
I go till May, yeah.
Okay, so what do you have for the next 5 months?
So really, the Putting Lawyers First task force is coming to a conclusion as to their report writing now. Their investigative work is concluded. They're writing a report. So we'll go through that report and start working on bringing their recommendations to the Board of Trustees and then to the Supreme Court or wherever those recommendations need to go for implementation. We just talked about to the board a host of rule changes, particularly for the family practice rules, court rule changes to make the practice better. So it's really just the next couple months are going to be trying to implement the changes that we've been working on, from even months before my presidency started, but certainly at the beginning of my culmination over the past 7-8 months. So now the hard part really begins. It's trying to get the work done, which is exciting because there's a lot to do. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed. And it's really a privilege and a pleasure to try to do that. Identifying them is part of the battle, but now researching them and coming up with solutions, that's where we are. And now trying to effectuate change, trying to move the needle just a little bit.
Sometimes identifying the problems is the easy part, right?
Yeah. It's identifying how to fix it and then building consensus about how to fix it.
So you've been involved in the Bar Association, I'm going to assume 27 years? Is that right?
So. Yeah, sounds like it.
So what is your plans in the involvement or participation after May? Do you ride off to the sunset?
So I pretty much, they kicked me to the curb at that point. So I'll be immediate past president for a year. At that point, I really serve at the pleasure of, I'm still an officer, but I serve at the pleasure of the president. Will be Tim McGoffrin, another family lawyer. So that's an exciting moment for family lawyers. So
Mm-hmm.
Timmy will be our president. I think he'll allow me to hang around and form an implementation committee, at least a subcommittee, to make sure that all the initiatives of Putting Lawyers First is getting done. I think I'll continue working on that. And then after my immediate past presidency year is up, then I really, I become a has-been, and I fade into the sunset, and I focus again wholeheartedly on my practice, my firm, my kids, my family, which right now, it's just kind of divide and conquer.
Oh, yeah. There's a great quote by Shonda Rhimes. I think I don't know if it was in an interview or a speech at a graduation, but, she said, whenever somebody asks how I do it all, how I'm a mom, how I'm a successful writer, producer, she said, I'm going to be clear. You cannot have it all at the same time. When I'm excelling professionally, I am probably failing as a mom. And when I'm excelling as a mom, there's probably something that's failing in my career. And I was like, that is so true.
Yeah, but is it? I don't buy that.
You don't buy it?
I don't accept the word failing. I just don't. You know what I mean? I just don't. I think you can have it all. You may not be able to have it all at the same time.
Yes.
But not a failure. That is a priority at that moment. And I think all day, every day, we are shuffling our to-do list and our priorities. But I think family comes first, right? And I think that is the first thing that goes on our calendar, and almost everything then falls around that. You build it around that. And with enough notice, everything can work. Where it starts going south is where, people want to schedule things at last minute. And, that always gets a little hairy. But I don't, if I'm not active and present 24/7 for my kids, I'm not going to deem that as a failure. I changed that thinking to trying to be a good role model. Raising two daughters and son, I want them to have a healthy view of, what a working mom looks like, what a spouse looks like.
No, I agree. And I think failure might have been too strong of a word, but I do think that there is something, I think there is something about how you prioritize. It sounds like you're really good at setting the boundaries of now is my kid time, now will be my work time. And
I try right all the time. I'm not saying it's easy. And sometimes, you drop the hot dogs, I like to say sometimes, and, and I'm missing something that, but I think you can. And, I remember thinking before I put my name in for the state bar that, Jerry, you shouldn't do that because you have 3 kids and you have a practice and don't do that. You don't have the time. And I'm so glad I didn't listen to that voice, because this has been professionally, the best experience I could have ever asked for. And to think that I was going to deprive myself of that for fear that I couldn't do it all, that's sad. And so, it drives me crazy when I hear in committee meetings or something, a woman putting herself out there and someone else. And sometimes it's another woman saying, well, she's so busy, can she take this on? And it pisses me off, because if she put herself out there,
yeah,
she can take it on because she's asked to take it on.
I always say, is it us to decide?
You judge, right?
Yeah, she's saying she can do it. So, so I do agree with that. And I will say, I have 4 kids. I think our kids are around the same age. And I worked full-time when they were born, and I worked part-time, and then I stayed home for a few years and taught at Rowan University, and then I went back full-time. And I say that I think my kids benefited from seeing me work, and I think they benefited from seeing me love my job and love what I do.
Totally agree.
So I'm going to ask you the question that I ask most attorneys at this point, which is, and partly it's selfish, I always have to admit that. So I have college-age kids, some of them thinking about law school. So I always want to ask, if my 22-year-old called you up, Jeralyn, and said, I'm thinking about going to law school, but I'm not sure, what advice or what would you say to her?
Absolutely go. My 3 kids already think they're signed up for law school. I tell them I signed you up for soccer, for basketball, and law school. They think they're signed up already. Go. It is the greatest degree, the greatest gift we can have. You don't have to be a divorce lawyer like me. Don't have to do that. But this degree is a gift. And go. So if there's something else you want to do and you're passionate about that, do it. But if there's not, and until you figure it out, get your law degree.
Right. So I'm going to make her listen to this now. I'm friends with a lot of retired attorneys and retired judges, and they're all like, no, do something else. And I always say, the way you learn to think, the way you learn to analyze situations, it's the best degree, whether you end up practicing in a specific area of law or utilizing those skills in another way.
Totally.
All right, so season 2, we are ending each podcast a little differently than I did in season 1, if you listen to any of them. So we are finishing the podcast with crazy court case or a crazy case that you have handled in your legal career. Do you have one?
I have so many. I have people that fought like cats and dogs, and then they come up the elevator to get divorced, and they're kissing, and they reconcile. I've had people get divorced and remarry. I've had...
Did you have to do a prenup after that?
No, they didn't. I've had people experiment with their and swap with their neighbors, and then they leave each other for their neighbors. I've had crazy cases. I've had horrible cases. I've had a case where a father killed his son and himself. And I've had awesome adoption cases. So, it just runs the gamut.
Mm-hmm.
Kidnapping case where a mom kidnapped a baby in the island of Greece. It took up my whole summer getting the baby back.
I assume you did not get to go to Greece.
I did not. I wanted to. I thought I needed to do a site visit there to check it out, but I didn't get to go.
So, well, thank you so much for joining the Mighty MERP Podcast. I'm so glad we were able to get this done today.
Thank you for having me.
So, it was really nice reconnecting after all these years, and I'm going to invite you to my installation dinner in June for my presidency of the Atlantic County Bar Association.
Perfect. Tell me when that is. Are we still recording?
We are, but I'm going to stop it, and I will give you the date. But that's great. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening in. Mighty MERP is available on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite apps and players. But the best way to experience the show is to visit mightymerp.com. That's mighty, MERP.com. This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance.